Okay, this is the intro to the recording for the second day of the Feast of Tabernacles 2020. It's October 4, 2020. We'll give the Hebrew date once we go live, and we'll go live both on Facebook, live Sabbath service page, and on the YouTube Sabbath service page, just as soon as we get a green light from both streams. There's green light number one. Whoa, they both went out. Okay. All right. Hey, there's two green lights at the same time. Great. Greetings to those of you on Facebook Live Sabbath service page and to those of you on the YouTube Sabbath service page for this second day of the Feast of Tabernacles 2020. As you can see in our lower third, kind of way down here below me, but stretched along the bottom on the lower third. Hang on, let's see. I think we can get it up closer, and I can come in a little bit tighter with you here. We got Mr. Armstrong standing by in Australia from 1984 to provide a sermon from the time during the Feast of Tabernacles. And, if you don't mind, brethren, let me bring him on forward here. Because I noticed of all the things we did this morning, there's one thing I forgot to do. And we're going to be singing some hymns, and I need that white balance to be correct. So let me go over here and correct our white balance real quickly. While I give you the dates, we are October 4, 2020 on the pagan Roman calendar. And on God's calendar, since yesterday was the first day of the feast, many of you know that begins on the 15th of the 7th month each year. Well, we're now the second day of the feast, so it's the 16th day of the second, it's the 16th day of the 7th month on God's holy sacred calendar. And, I remember one of the ministers in Pasadena, a man that many of us loved very much. He had a very loving and warm spirit. He kept control out at headquarters very well for Mr. Armstrong and for Mr. Armstrong's chosen replacement as he worked under both men for a long time. During the Feast of Tabernacles, he used to love to play with, I think I've got this, so let me just correct a couple of preview shots here and come right back out with you. Okay. He used to, during the Feast of Tabernacles, he used to do something I thought was a lot of both fun and value to it, because it made you think. He would announce at the start of each, when I would stay back and help serve at headquarters, and this particular minister, Robin Weber, would be there conducting services. He would each day announce how far into the millennium symbolically we were with each day. At the start of the first day of the feast, you'd be at, practically zero. And by the end of that day, you would have run to, what is 1/7 of 1,000? Somebody have a calculator you can kick up on the screen. Maybe you can pop it in the comments and be absolutely exact. I'm just going to be kind of loosely shooting at it, unless I can get this screen over here to bring me up a calculator. Okay, let's see. Let's divide 1,000 by, divided by 7. And we get 142.85 and a bunch of odd numbers. All right, so each day of the feast would represent about 143 years. You could kind of round that off at 150. That means by the time we get to the end, we're going to be off about by 50 years, but just closely. By the end of the first day, you're about 150 years into the feast, 142.85 to be exact, kind of exact. Whole bunch of numbers after that. But then at the start of the second day of the feast, and we're several hours into it now, we're definitely past 150 years into the millennium on this day today. And what you're going to see after we sing some hymns, and we're going to get right to this. This is exciting. I'm not going to preach a lot of heavy stuff at you. This is a feast day. It's not a holy day. But it is a feast day, and in that essence, it's a solemn day. This is an assembly, not commended, but since we keep the feast 7 days, and we do have convocations, which you're welcome to be with us here, and I'm glad to have those of you who are here, whether you're watching live on Facebook, live on YouTube, or later from an archive in Vimeo or YouTube, or on Facebook Live's Sabbath service page archive, or from our cogtv.org archive video page, and wherever that button will take you. I have to decide where to send it. I usually send it to YouTube because most of you can receive YouTube pretty well. If you have a problem with YouTube, you've got a Vimeo choice to go to, where we also preserve our Sabbath services. But we're a little more now than 150 years into the millennium, and by that point in time, we will have cleaned up the mess from our having helped Christ, at least cheered him on as he poured out the 7 last plagues. Because when he returns, just a reminder from the first of the fall holy days, 15 days ago, on the first day of the 7th month, it's 15 days ago, even though today's the 16th, you got to count backward. You exclude today using the proper grammar, as Mr. Armstrong taught us. And the King James Version had the wrong grammar, had the wrong preposition for Leviticus 23 verses 15 and 16 for a long time. In fact, they even kept it after they promised in the New King James, the new editors of the New King James Version promised Mr. Armstrong, wow, Mr. Armstrong, you're right. That should not be from. That should be beginning with, if we add a preposition there. Because there's no preposition in the original Hebrew. But contextually, the Hebrew grammar teachers tell you, yeah, the way that should read is beginning with the wave sheaf day. We're interpolating. The wave sheaf day is the morrow after the Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread, and it's the morrow after the weekly Sabbath, as we correctly understand it. Now, Jewish scholars, Jewish religious scholars, rabbis, religious scholars, by their tradition for a long time, but not all the way back to the Levitical priesthood, because somewhere they've gotten it twisted now. For a long time, the Jewish religions today count Pentecost from the annual Sabbath, the first annual Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread, not the weekly Sabbath. It should be counted from the weekly Sabbath. And then you always have to count it. Well, they count it, quote unquote, count it from the morrow after the Passover, which is a holy day annually every year, the first day of unleavened bread. They count it from the annual Sabbath, not the weekly Sabbath. They count it from this day. They count it from this day to day. Well, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. If we were Feast of Tabernacles, if we were Feast of Unleavened Bread, they would be counting it from the morrow after Passover. All right, this is the morrow after the first day of Tabernacles. So, Steve, I'm sorry. I mistracked that just a little bit in my speech. Some of you know what I did. This is the fall season 7-day feast, not the spring season 7-day feast. But during the spring season 7-day feast, the first day of that Feast of Unleavened Bread is a holy day. That first day of unleavened bread follows Passover. And so the Jewish people start counting and determining the wave sheaf from that annual Sabbath, which makes it always be Passover's on the 14th. The first day of unleavened bread is always the 15th of the first month. Have I got that right? Passover is the 14th, and the next day is Feast of Unleavened Bread. The first day is the holy day. It's always the 15th of the first month. That makes the way the Jewish people do it, that makes the wave sheaf day always be the 16th of the first month. But that's not the way God intended for it to be. He intended for the wave sheaf day to be figured from the weekly Sabbath, from the weekly Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread. In other words, the wave sheaf day should be the morrow after, the day after the weekly Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread. Now that can float around. That weekly Sabbath will be any date anywhere from roughly it can be the morrow after a week. It can be the first day of the week if even for the Jews. Let's see. It's always the first day of the week if you count it the day after the weekly Sabbath. The day after the weekly Sabbath is the first day of the week. That's the way the wave sheaf day should always come out. And then when you count Pentecost 50 days later, that's always the first day of the week, because 7 weeks of Sunday through Sabbath weeks, and then the morrow after the seventh Sabbath day is the first day of the week that we count to day 50, Pentecost. All right, now, because I'm counting time into the Feast of Tabernacles, that made me think back on that. And we should have that correct. You know, there's some people that try to hold us onto a Monday Pentecost incorrectly. I mean, today you will run into them. And some of our friends have mates whom they've had to separate from, because not only are they perverted on how to count Pentecost because they refused the correction God gave us through our end-time apostle. He corrected us from the top down, which is something I prayed for when I saw that, hey, this looks like this ought to be the first day of the week. It ought to be the morrow after a Shabbat, not a Shabuah Sabbath. And so, you know, Shabuah wrongly figured. It is 7 Shabuahs, but it's 7 Sunday through Sabbath Shabuahs, Shabuah being the Hebrew word for weeks. There is a Hebrew word for weeks, so you can't just take the expression for the 7th Sabbath. The word Shabbat is used, not Shabuah. You can't make an idiomatic expression out of it and convert the week from being Monday through Sunday instead of a normal week, Sunday through Sabbath. What were we trying to do? Help the Roman Catholic Church change the times and the seasons? Well, we did it because of the wrong. Here's the point I was making. In Leviticus 23, verses 15 and 16, the King James translators, in their rendering of English, of an English translation from the original Hebrew, they added a preposition that's not in the original Hebrew. They stuck from in there. And Hebrew grammar people will tell you that really, if you're going to add a preposition there in an English translation, you can't do a full transliteration there. You got to translate it. If you're going to add an English preposition in there for the English language grammar to flow, it should be beginning with, not from. And that makes a whole day's difference. If you're a day late for Passover, after the death angel came, too bad, Charlie. You can argue all you want over your dead firstborn. I'm laughing because of the ridiculousness of some people's arguments, you know. And that's a hypothetical. If you're too late, if you're a day late, you didn't put the blood up till a day later because you said Passover ain't the 14th, God, it's the 15th. Well, God came he had the death angel come midnight of the 14th. Hey, your son is dead when you put that blood up the next day. He's already dead. He ain't going to come back to life. A day late can make a huge difference, brethren, friends. So those of you still keeping Pentecost on Monday, when God corrected us, we're keeping it on Sunday. You missed the boat, Charlie. And you're going to miss the boat. You're going to miss the 2 wings of a great eagle over this. It's serious business. You're going to find yourself left behind. You're probably going to find yourself a little short on God's Spirit, such that you might waver. When the beast says you got to work on Sunday, you say, hey, "Are we going to kill you?" Well, you probably say, oh, "Okay, I'll just cut it short. I'll just work half of what you want, but I'll let you see me work." No, you blew it. Now you're going to suffer the 7th seal, year-long day of the Lord. For for that, and you're not going to make it into God's kingdom for that kind of rebellion. God says you got left behind as a remnant, Revelation 12:17 remnant. You've got to Revelation 3:18. You've got to buy of God gold tried in the fire. All right, I didn't mean to preach a long sermon. I did ask God when I opened my mouth to inspire. And brethren, sometimes God uses repetition as a form of emphasis for something you need to be aware of. We're starting to have news that tells us this pandemic that some were making light of is more serious than some have thought. There is a biblical principle in quarantine. Some of you are ignoring that a little bit more than you should. Now, some are taking it to the extreme. If you're not sick, you don't need to quarantine yourself. However, you do need to be on guard against going places where people should have quarantined themselves, who have that virus. The coronavirus, the COVID-19, is a virus. It can be spread through the air, through people's saliva and little parts of saliva that get in the air. So there is some value to the mask, even though I hate those things. I have difficulty breathing through them, but you learn to do it. Because a lot of stores require you to wear one if you're going to come in and shop there. And for the present time, there's probably some wisdom to that. Either keep good distance or wear the mask. Now, until this thing goes down. Now, yes, God can protect some of us, and I've leaned on that protection maybe more strongly than I should have, because I just boldly and fearlessly go here, go there. But we have our president who's done that, and he's gone into places where you probably want to consider, do some of these people where I am have this virus? And if I don't keep some distance, and if it's an enclosed room, you may need more than 6 feet because it can get in the air. So use wisdom. We need to use wisdom. But back on this point where we are. The word from in Leviticus 23. I want to read those two verses since I touched on that subject. And you shall count unto you, the King James here has, from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths. And that word for Sabbath right there is Shabbat, not Shabuah, shall be complete. And verse 16, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Now the word from is not placed in verse 16. And if we were to have used verse 16 as a check reference to what's going on in verse 15, we could have, would have, should have said, those who were really discerning God's word should have said, well, wait a second. If we're counting to the morrow after the 7th Shabbat, now if you'd taken the trouble to have looked up the original Hebrew word there, Shabbat, and seen that, and looked up the word for weeks, and you find out if you've been instructed and you understand transliteration rules, which were given to us by our French language instructor at Ambassador College, Mr. Debar-Apartian, who would come in from time to time and teach that class, even though there was an actual French class instructor. On occasion, since that French instructor worked under Mr. Debar-Apartian, Mr. Debar-Apartian would himself come in from time to time and teach the class himself. One day he came in and said, I'm going to teach you students 500 French words today in 5 minutes. When you walk out of this class today, you'll know the pronunciation and the meaning of 500 French words. And some of us thought, oh my, I got to know, I got to memorize 500 French words from Mr. Barnian coming into class today. He said, no, this is not going to be difficult. This is going to be so easy, a piece of cake. He said, you already know them. You already know them. And he said, here's the key. Here's the secret to what I'm teaching you today. Every word in English that ends in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N is a French word with the same meaning in English as it has in French. The only thing you've got to do different for our French language class is enunciate or pronounce it in French styling. So let's take an example. Description. Instead of saying description, which would have the same meaning in English as it does in French, it means the same thing, but you just pronounce it description, the way the French would do it. Or pick another one that pops in my head, prescription. Prescription, same meaning as in French, as in English, same meaning in French. And you should do that with all the words that end in English, that end with S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N. You already understand the meaning of it. Just pronounce it the way the French pronounce it. Interpretation instead of interpretation. So, oh, well, wow, you can almost speak French knowing that secret. Just pick words that end in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N and just say the word. And you've got some basis of understanding with a person that only speaks French and no English. And a lot of them speak English, but they won't. If you go to their country, culturally, it's been a thing. French people have this unwritten rule. They will not speak English with a foreigner, especially one from America, uh, 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 stubbornly. They won't, even if you're in trouble and need help. Some few might bend over on that one, but even if when they can speak English, they won't speak it with a foreigner in their country. Now, they might come over and speak it in your country, but you're in their country. They expect you to speak French. Stubborn Reuben. Some of those people over there almost caused me to miss my train from Marseille, France, to Vienna one year the year I was going over to see the crown of the Holy Roman Empire. This train I'm looking for my train to Vienna, and I'm expecting it to be some variation of French. I knew how to say Vienna in French and in English, and I'm looking for a train that's got a V, Vienna, something like Vienna on it. Well, this train, time has passed the schedule. But then here's this train I see moving out of the platform, one of the platforms where I was, and they can come on different platforms over there, so you got to watch several, at least at that time. This train is pulling out. I was like, way past time. And I notice on the back of the train it says W-I-E-N. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh, wait a minute, Vienna, next to Germany. They speak the German language in Vienna. I'm trying to figure this train out in English or French. I'd studied 2 years of French at that time. And all of a sudden it dawns on me, that's my train to Vienna, W-I-E-N. It's moving out of the platform. It was moving slowly, it just moved slowly. You could walk beside it and go with it. But I had 3 bags. Dumb me, I should have put 2 of them in for that little side trip I did. I should have put 2 of my bags in a locker. They have lockers you could purchase. I should have put 2 big bags I wouldn't have needed in a locker and just taken a small bag of change of clothes with me for that little side trip by train to Vienna. But here's this train moving out. I realized that's my train. So what I did was I ran up alongside and how did I get way up there? I don't know. Somehow I had my bags on a wheelie or something. I got up middle of the train. It's still moving slow, and I throw in 1 bag. All right, a couple or 3 cars move by. The train is speeding up. I throw in my second bag on a different train car, and then a few more cars move by. I turn around, grab my third bag, throw it on. 2 or 3 cars move by, and the train now is speeding up. I have my ticket already, and so what happens? Oh, you know what I'm noticing? We're losing our volume again. Now, we're still having that little problem we had the other day, and I thought we had resolved it, but it looks like we haven't. All right, I'll tell you this story later. We got to get to Mr. Armstrong and get to some singing because we're having an audio problem. Okay. I appreciate your prayers, brethren, that God will help us resolve this problem. Um, okay, what? I don't. Let's go to a hymn. I'll tell you the story. I'll bore you with my story later. I did make it on that train, if you can hear me. Um, but then I had to go round up my bag. Our volume's back. Thank you. After I got all three bags on that train, I had to spend the next half hour going through all those cars and rounding up my bags. Now we lost the audio again. Something strange is going on. We'll appreciate your prayers. The devil doesn't like our doing these broadcasts, um, or it could just be equipment. But brethren, we'll appreciate your prayers that our things will work here the way they should. Let's go to a hymn and sing together. We'll sing this one from Psalm 15, page 14 in the purple hymnal. Who shall dwell on thy holy hill? Let's all sing together, beginning verse 1. Verse 2, everybody. All right, brethren, thanks to those of you who were singing along with us. It looks like we've got the volume back. And let me just tell you, we're going to go to another song. But one of the things about today's broadcast that I wanted to encourage you about that relates to how we're more than 150 years into the millennium now is the fact that by this time into the millennium, 150 years or more into the millennium, we will have cleaned up all the mess from the 7 last plagues, the Battle of Armageddon that occurs after Christ's return, or at Christ's return. We'll have cleaned up all that mess. People will have had time who were living during these days of Satan, the rule of Satan and all his governments. They will have had several decades to get the devil out of their system and get used to the loving reign and rule. Of course, with the rule of a rod of iron, we're not going to put up with no stubbornness. You don't keep the Feast of Tabernacles. These days we're keeping today. No rain. And then after some time of that, if you continue to be a stubborn nation and not keep the Feast of Tabernacles, the plagues of Egypt Christ will pour out on those countries. So we'll have established keeping God's law for over 100 years. We'll have cleaned up the mess that we will have had at the beginning of the millennium. We have to clean up from men fighting against the return of Christ, and we'll put that rock. You know, I've got this graphic. Let's see. Let's go back to this for a second. I got this graphic of from the Revelation booklet that pictures Christ coming as a rock and smashing on the feet of that statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. And that that statue represents the governments of this world, which today the feet are and the legs are the Roman government, the current world ruling government that will have come into power ruling the whole world except for that little area in Jordan where those who are counted worthy to escape are being protected. The rest of the world, the beast has dominion over it. the Roman Empire with the Pope riding the beast. But Christ will return and smash that image on the feet, that statue representing the governments, world-ruling governments, will fall to the earth, and that'll be the end of all the governments of this world, to be replaced by the one who this rock represents, Jesus Christ, who qualified to usher in and restore that government by having conquered the devil in what was a battle for world rulership, a most supreme battle. And Christ won it, qualified to usher in and restore the government of God, smashing the current governments on the feet, all those governments toppling, replacing the Roman calendar with just God's sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar, on which you can see today's date. On the Roman calendar, October 4, is the 16th day of the 7th month today. Feast of Tabernacles number 2. We're 150 years or more into the millennium. Should be a joyful time. And the feast film, after we sing one more hymn, the feast film we're going to have for you today is Mr. Armstrong speaking in 1984 during a feast in Australia. And he's showing some of the glorious and wonderful things God blessed the work to do for the young people of Brethren, with SEP camps and with the YES and with young people being able to come to Ambassador College. You'll see what the fruits of the work and the wonderful blessings God gave to what was one unseparated, unscattered body at that time. And we're going to have that again once God regathers us to the place of nourishment, protection, safety, final training. We're trained for becoming the bride of Christ in a very special way, and we can help others. Before that marriage ceremony, we'll all meet one another in the air. We'll be helpful to Peter and to Paul and the other apostles and the prophets and Abraham and Isaac. Of course, Christ will talk to them too, but they'll hear from Mr. Armstrong, and they'll see the works God did through him in the latter days, doing things that Daniel wanted to know. God, what is this you're talking about? It's going to happen in the latter days. Go your way, Daniel. The book is sealed until these end times, these latter times, these times that we are in right now, and picturing the future when we transition over from the governments of this world having been toppled and replaced by the return of Jesus Christ, the rock, to come and usher in and restore God's kingdom to this earth. Let's sing with joy about that, brethren. Let me go back to some of these hymns. And let's see, here's one. Let's see, we sang Who Shall Dwell on His Holy Hill. I think that's the one we sang. All right, I'm going to just sing one more before we go to Mr. Armstrong. Make sure we have plenty of time for this very special feast film today, and we'll sing some more after we come back. But let's do this one from Psalm 5, page 4 in the purple hymnal. We'll have the words scrolling on the screen again. Give ear unto my words, O Lord, as we pray before the eternal every day. Everybody, let's sing on verse 1 together. Way. Hear my loud cry, my King, my God, for I to thee will pray. Boom, boom, boom. Early hear my voice, I early will direct my prayer to thee, and looking up and answer will expect. Everybody sing with me now, verse 2. For thou art not a God who does in wickedness delight. No evil shall abide with thee, nor fool stand in thy sight. All evildoers thou dost hate, cut off shall liars be. The bloody and deceitful man abhorred is by thee. Verse 3, let's finish it. But I into thy house will come in thy abundant grace, and I will worship in thy fear toward thy holy place, because of watchful enemies. Oh, lead me by thy grace, and in thy righteousness thy way make straight before my face. Heartily on verse 4, everybody. Let all who trust in thee be glad and shout their praise proclaim. Thou savest them that all rejoice who love thy holy name. For Lord, unto the righteous man thou wilt thy blessing yield. With favor thou wilt compass him about as with a shield. Brethren, thank you to those of you who sang along heartily on that wonderful hymn. Let's go ahead, as I told you we would do, and let's bring Mr. Armstrong in. Let's see, where is he? Oh, he's on this one. Okay, I've got the recording for this on a video clip from that I played 3 years ago, and I need to let it roll up to the place where Mr. Armstrong, where it begins to go in. And so I hope you'll look forward to this. Again, this is Mr. Armstrong speaking in 1984 and from Australia. 84 behind the work film for Feast of Tabernacles, third day, and I'll be back with a hymn for us to sing at the end.
The following is a Worldwide Church of God presentation.
Well, greetings, brethren. Brethren in Australia. We just came, I visited day before yesterday, I guess I should say, the SEP summer camp. Now, I just want to say a word about these summer camps and about our YOU and YES program. Perhaps it is the most important program in getting the gospel to the world that we have. I don't think our brethren have ever realized just how important it is. And brethren, this church is trying to turn the hearts of the children to the parents and the parents to the children. And I tell you, it's taking great effort, and that's the value of these camps, these summer camps. That's the value of this YOU and YES. And to get the parents interested in working with their children and the children in working with their parents. That is not going on in any other church, and it never has been going on. It is today. We're commissioned to get the gospel, and the gospel is the good news of the coming kingdom of God. It's not a gospel about Jesus Christ, it's the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's the gospel he proclaimed, and the gospel he proclaimed is the good news of the coming kingdom of God. Now, when we proclaim that to the world, most of them are listening with dumb ears. They can't understand a word. We're to get the message out to them as a witness, not to convert them, but for a witness. And it is a witness to all nations all over this world. But of all of the people that need the witnessing, those young people are first. God is not trying to save this world. But these young people do, because they are the children of parents in the church, they do have access to God. And in just 10 short years, most of those young people are going to be getting married and raising children of their own. And there is the most important field for us to reach with the gospel that there is. And I find that many of our brethren don't realize at all the importance of the work of the church in the YOU, the YES, and what we're doing with these young people. I would like to wake you up and have you understand and realize how important it is that we get to the youth. And they're the ones that are the coming leaders in God's world tomorrow when Jesus Christ comes to rule over all nations. And even if they're not converted yet, they will have much of the training and they will be leaders. And to be indifferent against a camp like that would be one of the worst sins you could commit, brethren. So I hope that none of you will be.
In the closing verses of the Old Testament, God spoke through the prophet Malachi to our time. He spoke across the ages to a generation living near the end of 6,000 years of history. 6,000 years in which human beings have rejected God's ways and have reaped the bitter fruit of their own way. The society they have built is based on a foundation of greed and selfishness. It is ruled by Satan, once an angel of light, but now the adversary of God. It has become his world, and it is doomed to destruction. To this end-time generation, God would send a messenger whose commission, like Elijah of ancient Israel, is to restore the truth in the midst of moral and religious confusion. But this generation is not the last to live in the end-time world. Children have been born to them. Children whose destiny could be to live on into the world tomorrow to become the foundation of the new society that will fill all the earth. Against these children, Satan has waged a relentless and insidious war to destroy their potential and rob them of their destiny. The end-time world has become a dangerous place for children. One-third of all people on earth today are children under the age of 15. Most live in the poorer countries, condemned to a life of misery and squalor. 1 out of 5 of these children will die before they reach their first birthday. Those that survive may never get enough to eat, may never have clean, safe living conditions, will not receive even the minimum education or treatment for the diseases that will leave millions of them physically and mentally maimed for life. In this world that has made such awesome progress, millions of children and teenagers still are forced to live in inhuman conditions, without opportunity and without hope. And while the world spends $2 billion every week on war, every 2 seconds, a child dies of hunger. In the developed world, physical living conditions are better. Improved sanitation and medical facilities have greatly increased the children's chances of growing up. But the children of the richer world must face other serious problems, for Satan has flooded their world also with cruel deception and lies. In the midst of affluence, these children face moral and spiritual poverty, as Satan uses every evil device to undermine marriage, education, to pervert culture, and discredit what remains of the true values. Children become ever more frustrated and confused. They become alcoholics or hopeless drug addicts. They're drawn to bizarre and perverted entertainment. And many are driven to suicide. In despair and frustration, children and parents have begun to lose contact and turn away from each other. The family, the basic building block of civilization, has begun to crumble. And so, as the human race stands on the threshold of the world tomorrow, God, through the prophet Malachi, gave one more commission to his end-time servant. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. That is the challenge facing the families of God's church today. The Bible shows that the children of the people God has called also have a unique opportunity.
Well, I've been waving to you ever since I arrived. Now I'll say hello and greetings. Young pioneers, because that's what you are. Well, I want you to understand, really understand, who you are. I suppose if I'd ask you, you'd say, well, that's a crazy question. We know who we are. Well, I'm not so sure you do. I'm not so sure you do. But there's one scripture in the Bible that especially concerns you young people, and that's in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 14. And that shows that your parents, supposing you're in a divided home, maybe your mother left the church and your father's in, or maybe your father left the church and your mother stayed in. If even one of them is in the church, you, as their children, are what the Bible calls sanctified because of the one who is in the church. Now, that doesn't mean God has called you. That does not mean that you're sanctimonious, that you're goody-good, or anything of the kind. But it means you do have access to God. And Jesus said that no man can come to him except God calls him. The average person can't come to Jesus Christ. But if you're the child of one parent that is in the church, you can come to Christ. Now, a lot of you aren't quite old enough yet. But when you come to the place where you see this seriously enough and you know that you're tired of the way the world is living and the way you've been living and you want to live God's way, you can come to Christ. The door is open. You have access. Now, that doesn't mean you're any better than other kids, but it means you've got that chance now and they'll have to have it later. They're going to get it just the same as you. It doesn't mean God's favoring you any more than them. But you can have it now. And that's one way that you are different. I said in the beginning I want to tell you who you are. And I think a lot of you didn't know what I just told you. You are young people that have access to God in a way that other kids do not have yet.
To help families meet the challenge and to help bridge the gap that has opened up between parents and children, the church is developing a comprehensive youth educational program. This program, directed by Pastor General Herbert W. Armstrong, is designed to support the parents in teaching their children and to provide positive educational and recreational opportunities for the youth of the church. Youth 84, soon to be in its 5th year of publication, is written to help teenagers deal with the problems and pressures unique to their generation. Its lively, colorful pages show its readers how to live carefully in this world while preparing for the future that God has waiting for them. Through the youth educational services, the church has developed a multi-level correspondence course for children between the ages of 5 and 13. The YES course gives parents a helpful tool to teach their children the basic principles of God's plans so that they can start out their lives on the right foundation. The individual lessons of the YES course are written by senior ministers and experienced teachers. Mr. Armstrong reopened Imperial Schools in 1980 as a coeducational non-profit private elementary and secondary school. Like Ambassador College, it was founded to recapture the true values in education. It is a pioneer in education today and a forerunner of the schools of the world tomorrow. YOU, Youth Opportunities United, is the Worldwide Church of God's international program for teenagers. Through many varied activities, YOU gives older children educational, social, and recreational opportunities within the framework of the church. Every summer, hundreds of teenagers have the opportunity to attend one of the summer educational programs that are held in many locations around the world. Young people from all backgrounds come together for 3 weeks of challenging activities and fun. But it is fun with a purpose. The church's main campsite is located on the shores of Pelican Lake near Orr, Minnesota. In the 20 years of this camp's existence, much valuable experience has been gained in training, teaching, and encouraging teenagers. For many, the 3 weeks of summer camp has been a turning point in their lives. Mr. Armstrong knows how responsive a teenager can be to encouragement. In his autobiography, he remembers how when he was 16 years old, he had a summer job. His employer praised his work and expressed confidence in him. For the first time, the young Herbert Armstrong was fired with the ambition to make something of himself and become a success. It was a turning point in Mr. Armstrong's life. The summer education program can be the turning point for other young people. Perhaps the right word of encouragement will help a teenager think seriously about the opportunities ahead. Mr. Armstrong is a frequent visitor to the campsite at Orr. In a moment of relaxation before meeting the campers, he reviews the purpose and goals of the summer education program.
I think we should teach them a little differently. Not just your goal should be to get into the kingdom of God.
Right.
But your goal should be to learn how to, because in the kingdom of God, they're going to have to teach others and be a leader, lead others, guide others. In other words, rule over others. Plain language.
Mm-hmm.
But rule means leadership, setting the example.
Well, I tell the counselors and the staff that our number one goal here is to get young people talking to their mom and dad and talking to the minister and working on their problems themselves. If we can get them talking and communicating and mom and dad will listen, then that's very important.
Well, in other words, they learn to start a different kind of life. And the question is, do they continue on that kind of life, or they just make a start and go back? You say about 75% continue.
Right, I would say between 70 and 75% as of last year. And
If
hopefully
just
it will
one
be...
or two continue, it's worthwhile.
Right.
But 75%, how many do you have here at each camp?
We have 336 each session.
Yeah.
So well over 1,000 just in Orr. And then close to 300...
Through the summer, over 1,000.
Yes, over the 3-month summer. And they're willing to work on it, but they do need help and guidance. They're still teenagers.
The summer camp is first and foremost a place of education. And Mr. Armstrong has long taught that education should be conducted in an atmosphere of quality. He makes a point of personally inspecting all new facilities. He also believes the summer education program should offer ample opportunities for both education and fun. The summer camp program allows teenagers to experience the thrill of ultra-modern sports. Others can enjoy more down-to-earth recreation.
If you want to hear all the kids yell, just do that one there.
This one?
Uh-huh.
Summer camp is fun, but behind the fun, there is a serious purpose. Discussing the camp program with ministers and senior staff members, Mr. Armstrong explains how the weeks spent at SEP should also be a learning experience.
I am impressed that many of the members of the church scattered all around the world probably must have the idea that these camps are just a place for kids to come and get into some sports and have an outing. Maybe they get into a lot of mischief and all that sort of thing. It's just a case of having fun. And I wish that all the members of the church could come to one of these camps and get their eyes opened. Yes, they come here and have fun. But the thing is, they get a new definition of fun. Some children have come to these camps that have been trying to get fun out of drugs, smoking marijuana, and then even worse things. They learn that that's no fun and it's only harming and damaging them. But they learn things here and skills that really are fun and that are enjoyable. Now, we're trying to teach children at these camps some of the better things of life that are worth more than just money. Doing, giving, helping. They learn character here. They learn discipline. This is, in 3 weeks, the transformation that is made in the lives of these children is unbelievable. The time to begin teaching is little children. And we adults have been overlooking that fact too long. This is the work of God Almighty. And the most important phase of it is the little children. And thank all of you people here on the staff for the work you're doing with these young people. You will never know how valuable the work you're doing really is and how much fruit it's bearing. But I can tell you, and someday you'll learn it. So thank you.
The fine facilities at the summer campsite encourage a high standard of play, and enthusiasm runs high in both players and spectators. While the campers receive expert instruction in improving their skills at their favorite sports, the greatest emphasis is placed on developing a right attitude. A sense of fair play, accepting your mistakes, helping the other players to do their best, are traits of character that far transcend the basketball court. Once learned, they can carry over into other aspects of life. An important lesson that instructors teach is the ability to work in harmony with others, to achieve success as a team.
You know, a lot of times in playing sports, especially today, the main emphasis is on who wins the game. Well, I want to bring out a few things before we take the field here this morning that are things that we want to emphasize and will be emphasizing in your classes here at the SEP camp. One of them that we want you to keep in mind is very important, and that is teamwork. How well do you play together as a team and as a group? Or are you just a group of individuals playing just for yourselves? Everyone's position is important. Doesn't matter what it is. You might even be a substitute. Maybe you're not going into the game right away. But when you do go into the game, when you're called upon, your team is going to be looking to you to perform and to back them up in the best possible way. Another thing that's important, that is very vital in softball, is attentiveness. Are you concentrating? Are you attentive? Are you aware of what's going on during the game? Because the game can go by and change very, very rapidly and quickly. And if you're out in the outfield and you're watching some of the other people in the other areas, if you're not concentrating, if you're not listening, then you're going to find out that you'll make a mistake or you'll let the team down. And that's something to remember in your life also as you go beyond SEP, being alert, being attentive, concentrating, and working on that. These are things that are not only important for you while you're here at SEP, but that you can take with you as a part of your character.
Ministers with many years of experience quickly build a rapport with the campers.
Okay, we're going to go out in the field in just a moment. Do we all feel like we can put some of these things into practice?
Yes, sir!
Okay, let's get our gloves and head out.
Good sportsmanship, fair play, seeing that everyone on both teams has the chance to do their best. Campers soon learn that when a game is played this way, everybody wins. Perhaps the most challenging opportunity offered by the program at Orr is the 3-day canoe trip through the beautiful country along the border of Minnesota and the Canadian province of Ontario, one of the last true wilderness areas of the United States. Proper orientation and careful preparation are essential if the adventure is to be a success.
I want to start out, first of all, by telling you that I hope you're going to have a lot of fun. I want you to really get out and enjoy that. How many of you come from a city, live near a city? Most of you? How many of you ever been on a canoe trip like this before? Just a very few. Okay, a short one. How many of you have been on one of these before up here at SEP? All right, so it's a new experience for most of you. I want to tell you a little bit about where we're going. It is a habitat for all kinds of wildlife. In the last trip, we saw 4 moose. So at one time, we've seen bald eagle, badger, lynx, and of course the American brown bear. They are quite prevalent. Even this year, we've had bear in the camp ransacking the food supplies. So, it is, like I say, very much a wilderness area. Now, you'll find that if you take an approach to this trip of being negative, of being downhearted, of saying, oh, I want to be back at camp, you find that 1 or 2 of you begin to grumble and you start listening to one another, you're going to find you slow down, you're going to find you hate the trip. When you start to do that, when you get tired, if instead you put your head down and you paddle harder, and if you start to complain, if you bite your tongue and close your mouth and say something cheerful, you're going to find that this is the greatest thing, that happened to you. It may rain, you may get sunburned. It may be calm, it may be windy. That's part of the beauty of it. We have absolutely no control. This is the Boundary Waters canoe area right here. Like I say, it's about 150,
Wilderness
200
canoe
miles.
trips have a permanent
Nothing
impact
but pure wilderness.
on the life
And
of
this
the
up here is
camper.
the Canadian equivalent.
Partially
And it's
because
even
they
bigger
last
than
for
this.
3 days,
Absolutely fantastic.
partially because of the
You'll
unique
be on
setting,
the,
where there's
Canadian
more
American
water
border for quite a
surface
bit of the
than
time.
land.
All right? You'll probably camp in there one night, and then the last day you'll come down over Devil's Cascade and down the Little Indian Sioux River, where at 3 o'clock in the afternoon we will pick you up, suntanned, windburned, and beards, macho. All right. So the first day, plan on it, you're going to hurt. Your muscles are just going to be sore. You'll get up next morning and, man, you really have to stretch out. The second day, after a couple hours, you begin to feel really good. And the third day, you could conquer the world. So we expect to see you come in here with paddles working and big smiles on your face and haven't had a great time. Remember, though, you guys are the ones who make it a good time or a miserable time. So regardless of what the weather or the wind conditions do to you, you guys pull together, make a team, and build some character, and you'll find that as a result of doing that, you're going to have the time of your lives. All right? All right.
During this 3-day trip, they take into these craft all of their food, all of their clothing, all of their shelter. They begin 3 days that contain incredible opportunities for character development. Character development does not require huge decisions, but can be decisions over seemingly small issues, but made properly and reinforced, become part of our character. Campers are faced with dozens of opportunities per hour, and it's into this unique setting that we send 10 people on a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Interestingly enough, the trips that run into adversity are the ones where the teamwork and the unity comes together much quicker.
I don't have one.
When the same campers are 30 years old and have a wife and children, and some trial comes into their life that threatens to stop them cold, it may very well be a canoe trip that they look back upon and say, this experience is what helped give me the character and the help that I needed to get through this trial. At the end of 3 days, it is a moving sight to see a group of campers come across the lake with their paddles flashing in unison. These same campers are the future leaders of God's church and in the world tomorrow. And it is experiences like these that helps them learn to be faithful in little, which will go a long way in helping them later be faithful in much.
Welcome home, fellas!
Have you ever thought about how
An important addition to the summer education program is the Communication Center. In this small but well-equipped facility, campers are able to experience for themselves some of the aspects of radio, television, and newspaper production. Who knows For some, this might be the beginning of a rewarding hobby or a lifetime career.
We use the team concept in communications as well. We will pick a dorm and break them into various groups. Each group will work in one aspect of communications. One might do a writing assignment.
Making lots of friends.
Another group might do a radio tape.
SEP, it's a great place to be.
Some would work with the television cameras, while the rest of the class would be working in photography. Most of the campers who come here have never had any experience with a 35mm camera. We take them through the whole process: how to use the camera, processing the film, and darkroom techniques. Then they get to take a piece of film and make a print of their very own. It's quite an experience for most of these campers. They go out and take their own photographs. They'll go out and do an assignment. They shoot it. They make the print.
Hey, that's really good.
Then we mount it for them, and they have that to take back with them after camp.
That's really good. I'm impressed.
One of the goals we have in communications class is to produce a complete newspaper.
So what I want you to do.
Each dorm has their own page, so if it's dorm 1G, then it's a page headlined 1G. Or if it's 2B, then it's the 2B page. They write the articles, they take the photographs, they write the headlines, all for their own camp newspaper. They really get excited about that.
While teenagers enjoy experiencing the new things, time is taken to teach the age-old principles, without which true success is not possible. An important part of summer education programs worldwide is the Bible education class.
We're going to take a trip into the world tomorrow. And Mark, would you start reading Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4?
And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more.
Now let's stop here and look at this verse. It says, and shall rebuke many people. Have any of you ever been rebuked? Okay. And have you been rebuked recently?
Yes.
Okay. By who? Okay, your counselor. Didn't you know how Christ will rebuke the nations?
Yes.
You'll see how important it is for Christ to rebuke the nations. Okay? And then it says that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. So how do you apply that to a modern, should I say, application? Yes, right here.
You're going to convert melt down all the weapons and everything and make it into farm equipment.
Okay, name me some weapons and name me some farm equipment, okay? Yes.
The MX missile.
The MX missile? Yes. In the back.
Things like tanks and the tractors or farm equipment like that.
Okay, yes. Over here.
You have like the intercontinental ballistic missiles and just all the different types of missiles that are used in nuclear warfare.
And they will be turned into what type of equipment? Now, name me some specific farm equipment. Yes, back there.
Tractors and trucks and stuff.
And stuff? All right. Name me some more stuff here. Yes.
Balers.
Balers, yes.
Harvesters.
Harvesters.
Combine.
Combines. So here we have a application of the world tomorrow where the weapons which man will make in this age will be used for farm equipment. Should I say the metal will be used for farm equipment in the world tomorrow.
Some of the challenges that these teenagers will face in the future may seem impossible and out of reach now. Building the world tomorrow will be a job for experts. Becoming an expert at the sport of archery, as in any other field, requires careful attention to detail, quality equipment, constant practice, and above all, the application of the laws that lead to success. The campers at the summer education program discover in their first archery lesson that there is a lot to learn before they can shoot an arrow accurately.
Okay, keep up the good work.
Okay, how you doing over here?
Well, not too good, Mr. Sexton. Not hitting the target.
Okay, well, go ahead and shoot this arrow and we'll see what you're doing.
Okay.
All right, what you want to do is raise your elbow up just a little bit, and you want to use your right eye. So open your right eye and close your left eye. Whenever you're ready, you can relax your fingers and let the arrow slide out. Good shot. Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
With encouragement and expert instruction, this camper begins to reach a level of achievement that he thought was impossible.
Okay, you want to make sure your right eye's open. So your left eye's closed, and just let the string slide away from your fingers. Nice and easy. Great. You're doing much better.
He has learned that in archery, as with everything else in life, he can succeed if he follows the steps that lead to success. Adopt the proper stance. Notch the arrow in the bow. Draw the bow back. Anchor the arrow. Take careful aim. Release the arrow and follow through. He hit the bullseye, but even more important, he has gained some confidence. Maybe these campers will never use a bow and arrow again, but they have learned an important lesson. Goals that at first seem out of reach can be accomplished if you follow the laws of success.
And the fourth law of success is? Drive! Now what is...
At SEP in Big Sandy, Mr. Armstrong enjoys seeing the young campers being taught these same laws that have borne so much fruit in his own life.
All right, drive is the fourth law of success. What is the fifth law of success? Resourcefulness. And the sixth law of success is? Perseverance. And the seventh law of success is?
Contact with God.
Good. All right, we've discussed how to have that contact with God. What are some of the ways that you do have contact with God? Personal contact. All right, anyone? All right, Stephanie?
Prayer.
All right, prayer is one of those basic ways. Kathy?
Bible study.
Bible study?
Meditate.
Meditation? Yes. All right, and fasting. Those are some of the ways that you can draw closer to being closer to God.
And so the campers at SEP learn that there are laws that will lead them to success in the things they want to do now and in meeting the even greater challenges of the future. Many of the campers at Big Sandy have attended camp at Orr in previous years. The facilities at Big Sandy give them the chance to have new experiences and to develop new skills as they respond to the direction and guidance of their instructors.
Big Sandy is unique. Since the campers have had previous experience, they are a little older and a little more responsible. They come to Big Sandy having better attitudes, having built a little better character, having more self-discipline, and better respect for God's laws and for man's laws. It is also unique in that not every young person in God's church can attend Ambassador College. However, the facilities are being put to good use during the summer months, in that hundreds of young people are getting a chance and an opportunity to see the campus and to be instructed by the college faculty. It gives them a chance to also see that Mr. Armstrong is not only concerned about their first camp experience, but that he is also concerned about their future as well.
Now, I've tried to tell you what's the purpose of the church. I've tried to tell you what's the purpose of human life and why God had people created. I've tried to tell you something about who and what God is. Now, I hope it made sense to you, and I hope you can take these things home with you. Now, just remember, you're no better than other kids, but you're learning things they haven't had a chance to learn yet. And you try to live these things when you get home. It means there's a bigger responsibility on you to live God's way. And others don't know how to live that way yet. But there's a big responsibility on you to do it, and you'll be so much happier if you do. And look how wonderful this earth can be if we live right. Look how beautiful things are on this campus. The beautiful trees and beautiful lawns and beautiful things. And if we just live beautifully, then everything is beautiful and lovely and we're all happy. That's what we're trying to teach you here. And we have these camps all over the world. We have one in Scotland. We have them in New Zealand. We have them in Australia and in South Africa. And I think these camps are a wonderful thing.
The summer education program for Britain is held on the banks of Loch Lomond in southwest Scotland. Campers from several nations enjoy a variety of exciting activities during the 3-week program.
When I first went to SEP 16 years ago, for me it was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream, because I was given the opportunity to do many things I never thought I would be able to do. Things which in Britain were just not available or were simply too expensive for the average person. Today, that is still the case. It's a real thrill to see teenagers involved in exciting activities they've never experienced before and would not experience apart from SEP. But perhaps the greatest satisfaction to me is to hear from parents after SEP describing the positive effect camp has had on their teenagers. Many are enthused and inspired and filled with a sense of accomplishment and simply can't wait to come back the following year. In fact, I remember one parent coming to me after church services, and he was really excited. And he said, well, my son now makes his bed, he's much tidier around the room, he's much easier to work with. I don't know what you've done to him up there, but it's really great.
One other very important goal that we're really wanting to emphasize here at SEP is in relationship to your families. Sure, have fun here with the activities. We're learning hopefully a lot more about interpersonal relationships, but very importantly, the relationship that you have with your parents. And we're wanting you to forge much stronger relationships with your parents. Now, one of the main characteristics, unfortunately, of this age in which we live is that families have been split apart. The divorce rate gets seemingly ever higher, and increasingly, children do not know their parents, and parents don't know their children. So a very important part of the Church's commission that we're wanting to emphasize here at SEP is, as Malachi says, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. In other words, bringing the families back together. Now, that's an important part of character. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to help you face life better.
In the leatherwork class, the campers learn a practical skill. Under expert guidance, this camper has made himself a useful memento of summer camp. Sooner or later, most campers want a flight on the parasail.
What do we got here?
This is William.
Hello, William. I'm Mr. Carter. Let me hold that for you and give you a handshake there. You ever done this before?
Nope.
Okay, we're all set up. Now listen, William, we're going to take you out this way, straight out, and we're going to whip you all around the lake right here, rather slowly. We're going to hurt you. When you get right here now, this is the point when we come down, the landing takeoff.
Yeah.
So when we land now, when I pull the hand, the side we show you, that's the hand you pull.
Okay, and what do you pull back? I want you to reach back and grab that rope there. Okay, now if I pull the other hand,
Reach back and go.
pull that hand. There you go. Now, what happens when we do this?
Do nothing.
Nothing. Just come straight down. When you land, what do you do?
Bend the knees.
Bend your knees. There you go to absorb the shock. You ever done this before? You said never.
No.
You gonna have a good time?
Yep.
Okay, we'll have to go there. Good job. Okay, get ready.
The instructors leave nothing to chance. But even so, it's hard to hide a feeling of anxiety in those moments just before your first flight.
Go.
Back to Earth after one of the most exciting few minutes of his young life. The moments of apprehension were worth it. Now he has the quiet confidence that comes from facing a challenge and succeeding.
Congratulations.
Demonstrating his interest in all the youth of the church, Mr. Armstrong traveled to the southern hemisphere to visit the campsites in both New Zealand and Australia. He was met in Wellington, New Zealand's capital city, by a group of college students and young church members who were touring New Zealand by bicycle.
The summer camp in New Zealand is a very beautiful facility on an isolated island which is accessible only by boat. And from there it is another 15 or 20 minutes by vehicle to the actual campsite. This part of New Zealand is still unspoiled. It's almost like entering a new world. The campers are asked not to bring radios, which helps create a very serene and idyllic atmosphere. It's about as close to a millennial setting as I've ever experienced. The churches in New Zealand are quite small and far apart, but at the SEP, the YOU members from all over the country can get together and also meet many other young people from all over our South Pacific region.
In addition to the usual summer education activities, the magnificent location offers many unique experiences, such as learning to sail a luxury yacht as she cruises in the warm waters of the harbor. Across the Tasman Sea, the Australian SEP is in full swing. A permanent campsite is being developed at Mugara in southeast Queensland.
Although Australia is a large continent, most people live in the cities. The SEP camps give the YOU members a chance to meet with other young people from all over the country. Activities like riflery, horseback riding and water skiing give the campers a taste of the outdoors and a chance to work together in challenging situations. They might have to persevere while learning to ski behind the screen of a high-powered boat, or perhaps concentrate on keeping their balance as they do a headstand on the water. Maybe it's enjoying the tranquility and sense of achievement of running before the breeze while windsurfing. Some campers try their hand at golf, or learn a handicraft, while others go to the rugged cliffs near Lake Mugara to learn rock climbing. Rock climbing is an exciting sport once you've learned the proper techniques and pay careful attention to the rules. It teaches courage, coordination, and attention to detail. Lessons that once learned pay rich dividends in less precarious aspects of life.
Mr. Armstrong flew to Lake Mugara by helicopter after visiting the Australian regional offices at Burleigh Heads.
Dear Mr. Armstrong, I have had the opportunity of attending the camps in Orr, Minnesota, Mugara, Australia, and also visiting the camp in Big Sandy, Texas. There is no possible way to thank all the people who have helped me to have some of the best times of my life, but I would like to thank you. I have heard you speak several times at Orr and also in Australia. I remember the excitement that the others had felt, especially in Australia where your visits are not as frequent. You talked to us as a grandfather would, warning and encouraging us. Sir, I want to thank you again for your continual concern and support of God's youth, because it is helping us to come closer to our ultimate potential.
What is the 8th commandment? Okay, you shall not steal. Let's turn to Ephesians 4, verse 28. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. While we're turning there, let me ask you, when does a thief cease to be a thief? Okay, it's not just a matter of when he stops stealing. That's just a thief between jobs, more or less. A thief ceases to be a thief when he ceases thieving and then repents. It's not just a case of stopping the act. It's turning around and replacing it with something good, driving out the evil with something that is good. So from Ephesians 4:28, we find here that a thief ceases to be a thief when he becomes generous, when he begins to give, to practice the way of give rather than taking from other people. What are the different ways that we can steal?
Yeah, just by at work, you're not working hard enough or taking long lunch breaks or something like that.
Okay, not putting in an honest day's work is stealing from the boss, isn't it? Okay, borrowing, quote unquote, as opposed to literal borrowing where the person doesn't know you're taking it. That really is stealing because you haven't been authorized to have possession of their goods. Taking a bribe. That's an example of stealing. Okay, you can be spending all of your time pursuing your own hobbies and interests, or even at the office doing work and neglecting your family, and you're taking away from the family relationship. You're stealing fatherhood from your children. You're stealing the relationship that the wife needs with her husband. They're stealing from God, stealing God's tithe. Okay, people rob themselves and they rob God when they steal God's tithe. Okay, giving somebody a bad name, taking away their good reputation. That's also theft, isn't it? So there are many ways that we can break this commandment, and if we learn to look at the expanded form as Jesus Christ magnified the law and made it much more far-reaching than just the physical act of taking something that's not yours, you understand these laws in their full spiritual intent, and it becomes a lot easier to be able to be like God, because God's law is what God is. And as we keep God's law and take that law into our minds and begin to practice what God teaches us to do, the 7 laws of success, the 10 commandments, we become like God. And that is the purpose of human life, so that we can become like God.
After carefully inspecting the new campsite, Mr. Armstrong talks to the campers and staff.
There's one thing terribly wrong with this camp. You know what it is? I've got one big criticism. It only lasts 3 weeks. It ought to last forever, if possible. Now, you're going to have problems when you get home. You'll find other kids your age aren't living like you learned to live here. Now, you've been tested on certain things here. Tightrope walking and some of the things you've done, and mountain climbing. Some things have tried your nerves, see if you've got the nerve to do it. And you'll be tried to see if you got the nerve to stand up for what you learned here when you get home. You see about it, and just pray to God and ask him to help you, and he will. Believe me, he will if you pray and ask him. So remember, you've found a better way of living. Don't ever lose it. Don't ever forget it. Just keep it, and keep it forever. So all of you carry on. I feel greatly rewarded for I've come a long ways to come here and see you in this camp. It's a long ways from Pasadena, California here. It's been worth it. I'm glad I came, glad I saw you. I'm glad you had the fun you've had here. And I hope that many of you will come back next year. And just remember that what you've learned here, don't ever let it get away from you. So I just say goodbye with that.
If the negative influences of this world are to be combated, children must be given encouragement and the opportunities to develop their talents and potential. Through the Ambassador Foundation, Mr. Armstrong has made constructive contributions to the education of young people in many parts of the world. While visiting a school for Hill Tribe children in northern Thailand, on behalf of Mr. Armstrong, Dr. Herman Hay presented a gift and offered some words of encouragement. At Bunyat Special Education Center outside Amman, Jordan, several Ambassador College students have taken a year off from their studies to become teachers. After visiting the center, Mr. Armstrong saw that Ambassador College could help by providing technical aid to develop the facilities. Also, he decided to send several students who could help in the training of both the teachers and the handicapped children. In Jerusalem, Arab and Jew live together in an atmosphere of tension and suspicion. The International Cultural Center for Youth, ICCY, was founded to help young Jewish and Arab children understand each other better. For this reason, Mr. Armstrong has been an enthusiastic supporter of the ICCY for many years. In Jerusalem, a special concert is performed for him by Arab and Jewish children. Of themselves, the activities of the ICCY cannot solve the problems of this tortured part of the world. But by building friendship and understanding between the children, they are taking a big step in the right direction.
I've lived a long time now. I'll be 92 this month, before this month is out. And I see the handwriting on the wall, and I see the way things are going in the world. And we haven't got much time. And the big job once we've gone through this crisis and Jesus Christ comes as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and we start the world tomorrow, a new world, and this world is dead and gone, there are many people who are going to survive all of the troubles of the Great Tribulation, and they will have children. And I can see that it's going to take not less than 3 whole generations before we can have world peace. Even after Christ comes, many of you seem to think that we'll have world peace just hocus pocus as soon as Christ comes. It isn't going to be that easy. Something has to cause it. People have to change the way they live before we have world peace, because it's the way people live that's causing all of the trouble today.
And so we must teach our children a different way of life. In the French province of Lorraine, near the little town of Morin, 80 children and teenagers from several European countries enjoy a summer education program, French style. The beautiful countryside of Lorraine is a sobering reminder of the need to prepare for a different world. For in these green fields on the border of France and Germany, Europe's great armies have clashed across the centuries. The Kaiser drilled and paraded his troops here. Then he led them into war, and a generation of young men were slaughtered. After the First World War, the territory was given to France. The French built a formidable barrier, the Maginot Line, to protect their frontiers forever against the enemy. But to no avail. Adolf Hitler promised his people 1,000 years of national greatness as he taught the children the arts of war and sent them to fight his battles. The Nazi legions devastated Europe for 4.5 terrible years before they were pushed back and destroyed by the combined armies of the wartime Allies. Only a few miles from the campsite at Morange is the war cemetery of Saint-Avold. Thousands of American soldiers are buried here. Most were young men, little more than teenagers, victims of a world that did not know the way of peace. It is sobering for the young YOU members to visit this cemetery. No greater contrast could be drawn between the ways of a world held captive by Satan and the way of life that comes from God. Satan's world has brought 6,000 years of misery and death. God offers life, abundant life in the world tomorrow, where no one will live in fear, and no nation will ever have to send its young men off to war again. One great conflict still lies ahead for the human race, a war in which terrible weapons will be used. So great will be this war, so devastating the power that will be unleashed, that unless God intervenes, no flesh would be saved alive. But God will intervene and bring the dazed survivors into the world tomorrow to begin a new way of life. What kind of a world will they inherit? Once lush farmlands will have become barren wastelands. Forests will be destroyed. Transportation links will be in ruins, and communication networks shattered. Lakes and rivers will be polluted. Food will be in short supply. And the air may be polluted from the dust and debris of nuclear war. There will be millions of widows and orphans in need of help, wounded in need of healing. This world's great cities will lie in ruins and their industries destroyed. The rubble must be cleared and the waste places rebuilt into sparkling, clean cities that are exciting to visit and a pleasure to live in. And so a new society will fill the earth. It will at last be a world that is safe for children. We are on the threshold of a new world when the knowledge of God's way of peace will cover the earth as the seas cover the ocean beds. The men, women, and children that God has chosen must learn that way. Parents and children that work together now will be the ones who are ready to teach in the world tomorrow. He shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the children to their fathers. That is the challenge facing God's people today. The first families to inherit eternity.
All right, brother. I'll be on screen with you in just a moment. Boy, I was sitting here watching and enjoying this very much with you. And we're going to sing a hymn or so before we close up. Let me make sure that's actually the full ending of this. All right, yeah, okay, it is. All right, and we are going to sing another hymn before we close up. You know, we're learning about Jesus Christ returning. And at this point, on the second day of the feast, he, just taking each day of the feast representing about 150 years, round number, averaged up, round number, into the 1,000 years of the millennium. So on this second day, we're now a little over 150 years, maybe around 200 years at this moment in the day, into the millennium. And as Mr. Armstrong said, it's going to take 3 generations. Now, how long is a generation? If you take one definition of the Bible, it's 20 years per generation, about 60 years. And some definitions of generation are longer than that. I'm not sure what Mr. Armstrong meant by generation. I think he was thinking 20 years when he said that, but it's going to take more than a half a century into the millennium before things normalize to what Christ will be restoring to this earth. And it'll be the first time with humans where we have we have humans under the government of God, and some of us transformed to spirit be helping him. All right, well, boy, Mr. Armstrong made a lot of points. I'm going to summarize some of those when we talk tomorrow. Some of the things Mr. Armstrong said yesterday and today. I may try to pull out some little punch quotes for you, some excerpts, if not tomorrow, sometime during this feast. Let's sing that hymn, brother, and we're going to close it up just a little bit early. This is a feast day, second day of the feast, and hopefully you, whether you're home or you've traveled somewhere, you are really rejoicing on this day, and I hope you felt as I did seeing The Hearts of the Children, the special feast film from 1984 that show how much God loves and provided for children of the church, how they're not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is because of having at least one parent in the church, as Mr. Armstrong pointed out and emphasized from the scripture that's on this screen behind me here. I'm going to pull it forward for just a moment before we sing. Let's take a close look at this. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 14, Mr. Armstrong was citing and quoting from as he spoke at one or two of the FCP sites. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else, as far as church kids go, else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. Now, what is God meaning by your kids are holy? You saints who have kids, you saints who are in the church who have kids. Well, it means they're not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is cut off. That's what God means by holy. They're sanctified. They're set apart. They're different. But Mr. Armstrong, that doesn't mean they're converted, they're in the church, or that they're even coming into the first resurrection, unless upon what they hear, they act on it. Seeing, hearing, they act on it and say, God, yeah, I want that. And they know where to go for it. Now, some of us whom God called from out of the world, who had grown up not being able to hear God's truth every Sabbath, every weekend, but being raised in churches of this world where we hear a different message, a different story, and we come across Matthew 16:18. Some of us, God puts it on our mind, as he did me, to want to know, where is that church? I see it. I understand what you're saying. I will build my church, underscore singular, church, not churches. Vanity plate, banana peeling groups take notice. All right, let's sing a hymn together as we close up today's second day, 200 years now into the millennium, the second day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Let's sing this one. And brethren, those of you who are called to the spring harvest, who are responding to it properly as you should, will be those who will be dwelling on God's holy hills. So think about that. That means you and me, God's saints today, those called to the spring harvest, is what this Psalm of David from Psalm 15 is picturing, and David is talking about here as we sing it. Who shall dwell on thy holy hill? Let's all sing together, beginning with verse 1. Everybody. Brethren, thanks to those of you who sang along with us on that for this second day of the Feast of Tabernacles 2020. God willing, we'll be back with you mañana at, what are we starting? At 11:30 Eastern Time. That's 10:30 Central, 8:30 Pacific. That's 4:30 in the afternoon in British Standard Time in the United Kingdom in London. And it's available on demand in the archive. We have streamed live today on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live. And it'll be in the archive on Vimeo and on our webpage at cogtv.org. Just look for the archive video menu in the right-hand side column from our homepage at cogtv.org. You can go directly to the index page by typing in sabbath.tv, and then you can find an archive copy of today's service and yesterday's service. We had 3 yesterday on the Holy Day, 3 services, plus we had the night before, just after sunset, Friday night, we had the opening night feast film, featured with a film that Mr. Armstrong encouraged us. He wanted us to be sure and see during the feast in not only 83 and years following that. He said, be sure to watch that Behind the Work Jubilee year. 1983 was the 50th year Jubilee year. And that was a very special feast film. We showed that Friday night, opening night for the feast. That's in our archive at cogtv.org. Select that archive video menu item, click on it, then look for Friday night's date, and you can watch that. It'll take you to a link inside of, I think YouTube for that one had the best, had much better than on Facebook Live. We had problems with our audio while we were streaming on Facebook Live. One wonderful thing I'm rejoicing over is that during this feast I learned how to set up the controls. I had a hard time with it before. I got the controls set up where we can stream live on YouTube. A very, very fine signal. And you know, things come and things go. Sometimes one source you use, things happen and you have to phase out on it. For now, we're still operating on Facebook Live, but who knows what the future will hold, so we're trying to line up other resources and things. Same thing for World Watch. We're working on licensing so we can get back on the air with World Watch. I'm negotiating with several news sources so we can use those news clips, have licensing for the news clips, and get the daily news related to the Bible and prophecy back on the air, so that those of you who are making the effort to fulfill the instruction Christ gave us in Luke 21:36, which are 2 prerequisites for being accounted worthy to escape all that's going to happen beginning with the 5th seal, Great Tribulation. You can escape that. You have to do more than keep the commandments. Revelation 12:17 tells us the remnant of the true church, of the seed of the woman who is the true church, who were keeping God's commands, attending God's feast, whether on site somewhere or this year under the virus, in your own home, which you may do this year, and connecting with us. And for those who want to do the principle, though, I recommend maybe sleep in a different room, set up a tent in your living room, maybe even in your own backyard. Take your second tithe money you would have traveled with and buy yourself a nice little tent, some very warm sleeping bags and pillows and cot, and tabernacle right in your backyard. You can do that this year. In fact, many governments are recommending stay home. And, we are too, within reason, I'm saying that carefully, we are to obey the authorities of our governments and local governments over us when those things don't conflict with God's law. You have to make your own decision about that. And if you say, I've got to travel somewhere for the feast, well, that Acts 5 does allow you, in that case, obey God rather than man. But if you can do both, and I'm telling you, you may. You can camp out in your backyard, in another room in your house, and this year convocate electronically. We are under a time of scattering. That's a form of persecution. It's very similar to what happened in Acts 8, verses 1, verses 4, reference the Church of God as being, quote unquote, scattered abroad. The word translated abroad can be rendered worldwide. Scattered worldwide. How about that? We'll see you tomorrow, 11:30 Eastern Time. Until then, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath wishing you Hak Sameach, happy Feast of Tabernacles 2020. I meant to zoom that screen out as I wave you by where our 2 hours are up. Bye-bye. Happy Sabbath. I meant happy Feast of Tabernacles. This is a feast day today. Happy Feast of Tabernacles. Yay, yay.